Well, I'd like to thank Annalisa for our sermon this morning. We'll close our time in prayer. What a message. What a message. And the part that I love is hearing her sharing about how it all started as a freshman in high school of turning pages in a Time magazine, and that we are never too young for God to be working in our lives. And so for all of us who are young and young at heart, I'm reminded of Paul's words to Timothy that says, don't let anybody look down on you because of your youth. Because God will use you in a mighty way, and He will start changing your life and put you on a path to make impact for His kingdom as young as we possibly can be. We take steps in that direction from a young age on. I'm looking out at all our youngsters today. We get more than normal in our family month of worship here. If you're normally part of Faith Kids, can you put your hand in there? Let me see you a little bit. I'm seeing some of you, okay. You get some reluctant people. Let me up the ante for those of you guys who aren't raising your hands yet and you're in Faith Kids. If you like ice cream, would you try and raise your hand if you're a Faith Kid who likes ice cream? Okay, one of our youngsters. Well, let me see what happens if I say, if you would like a gift certificate to ice cream. Is anybody interested in that? Is any of our young ones interested? A lot of our old ones are interested as well. All right, for those of us younger, our Faith Kids, who wants this? Who wants to be able to treat maybe your parents to this? Huh? Who want? Leo, you want this? Whoa, Merry Christmas to you. You know, no doubt, many of you were wondering, how's this going to play out? And it doesn't matter the age, if you're sitting there or not, or if you're old. You're like, so how's this actually going to go? Because there were many people in the room, there were many of you kids in particular, who are like, I want that. But are you willing to take a step forward in order to go on the path to lead you to something sweet? You know, God has a path for us that is so sweet. But the problem comes when we start to overanalyze whether or not we're supposed to actually take a step forward and come and get it, or if we're supposed to wait on His perfect timing. There's a phrase that I like to refer to called paralysis by analysis. And where we get paralyzed, we get stuck in not doing anything and not taking a step and not moving forward because we're over here analyzing every possible situation. We're analyzing, wait, are we actually supposed to go and get that? Or are we supposed to raise our hand? Are we supposed to take a step forward and go and get this? Are we supposed to do this? It seems like we could. But then we play the what-if game. Like, but what if that's not what we're supposed to do? We start weighing pros and cons in our head, and we're trying to picture every possible outcome that this could play. And so here we are, not taking a step in the direction that God has for us. And so I understand there are times in our lives that we will be waiting on God's timing. He's got a plan for us. He's got a path for us, but we are waiting for His perfect timing to see it come to fruition. And yet there are times that He's given us that, and we're just standing here. We're not taking a step towards something in order to get what He's got for us. And so we're going to unpack this today as our story in Ruth unfolds, and we hit chapter 3. We're going to come to understand how each one of the individuals in the story we've come to know with Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz, and how they've had an opportunity to take a step toward what God is doing in their lives. But we're going to see they're not going to take the step all willy-nilly. They're not just going to go and do something without putting thought forward, putting heart forward. They're going to have some checks in place. So if we're in this position where we're going, God, what do you want for me? What do you have for me? And we're starting to go, I think maybe this is what you have for me. We're going, do we take a step towards that, or is now a time of waiting? I think today we'll be able to unfold a little bit about what it means to be able to take a step. What prerequisites do we need to be able to take a step towards what God has for us? Let's get a little recap of the book of Ruth. We understand that there's this woman called Naomi. And Naomi was married, and there was a famine in their homeland of Bethlehem. And so they moved to Moab. And it was in Moab where her two sons met wives and married these Moabite women. But unfortunately, as time went on, Naomi became a widow as her husband passed away, and so did her two sons. So there she left as a widow with her 2 daughters-in-law. And at that time, the cultural norms would say that the safety, the security, the family lines, the ownership, the job, the finances, a lot of that stuff ran through the man of the home, through the husband. And so she understands that herself, but her daughters-in-law are in a poor spot. So she says, here's what you guys got to do. You got to go back to home. You got to go back to your parents' house. I mean, there you'll have security, you'll have safety until you can maybe someday find another husband. And so she's pleading with them, go, I have nothing I can offer you. And so one of the daughters-in-law, Orpah, took her up on that offer. And she went back home. But there was Ruth. And Ruth said, I will cling to you. And so they moved back into Naomi's homeland of Bethlehem. And they're scraping the barrel. And Ruth is going out and following the harvesters as they're picking the grain, and she's getting the leftovers that are there, and she's just picking up the scraps that she can find so they can have a meal at night. But it's during this time that we're introduced to Boaz. And we understand Boaz is a man after God's heart, and he loves the Lord, and he is a great man. And so he's allowing them to do this. He's bringing them extra food. He's feeding them. He's caring for them as he cares for all of the people that work for him. And so here's Naomi watching this play out. And I imagine that Naomi's watching Boaz, and she sees a little something in his eye when he looks at Ruth. And she's watching Ruth, and she sees just this awe when she looks at Boaz. And so now she's thinking, I think this could work. Is it time to play matchmaker? Do I try to set these guys up together? Because, man, does this seem like it's a perfect fit? So now she has to wonder, do I play the what-if game? Do I analyze it? Or do I take a step and go after what I think is a God thing, what I think is a good thing? And so we're going to find out. And our first principle today is that we can take a step, but first we check our hearts. First we have to check our motives and make sure that they are pure. So join me in Ruth, chapter 3, verse 1. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes. Go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do. See, I can read into this, and I can read it with my eyes and my lens. Because when I look at the world, when I often do things, I have to get a check in my spirit and say, am I saying this? Am I doing something because it's what's best for me? Because I think in our sinful nature, oftentimes we are looking out for numero uno before others. We care about ourselves and what we can get more than what we can give. And so there's this check in our spirit. If I'm going to have this conversation, is it about me? Because there's no doubt Naomi's like, I'm in this kind of this tag team thing here with Ruth. And if she can be married to a guy like Boaz, who's coming from a bit of wealth and security, that means I'm coming with. I'm the package deal, and we'll be taken care of. So we can read into this and go, where's her heart? Let's look at the text. Verse 1. And she says, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you? And she continues and says, that it may be well with you. She is caring. She is putting all her heart and all her attention onto what's best for Ruth. And it's not the first time. If we flip back to chapter 1 and look in verses 8 and 9 and beyond, we see that Naomi was arguing with her daughters-in-law to go home. I've got nothing for you. What's best is for you to go home and get back into your parents' household. At least there you'll have safety and security. In Naomi's heart, she has always had this check that it's been for Ruth. And therefore, she can go and have this conversation with Ruth and say, you know what I think is best for you? I think you go and propose to Boaz. I think you go forward and you make it known that you would like to marry Boaz. And here's what's going on in our land right now. It's time that they're going to be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. And I'm like, yeah, winnowing barley at the threshing floor. What is this all about? And so I did what any great scholar would do. I went to YouTube and I Googled it, or hit the old search button. I said, winnowing barley at the threshing floor, and I hit it. And up came a stream of a video that gave a reenactment of from Israel of what would have actually happened at that. I'm like, oh, that's kind of helpful. I'm going to watch this. So they would bring the crops into this threshing floor, this hard area, and they would have their animals hooked up, dragging this kind of this wooden block or wooden beam behind, maybe a 2 by 3 foot thing, and they would have the animals walk around and they would beat down what the crops were, this barley crop, and it would start to separate things that, I don't know, the good from the bad, that kind of thing. This is my farmer lingo now. You guys can fill in the blanks for those of you who know. And they get it out to this point where it's kind of like, okay, now we're closer. And so now what they have to do is they have to separate the chaff to continue to get it to a point where they can eat it. So they take these shovels and they throw it in the air, and the winds just take the chaff away. And so I imagine like a campfire when the wind picks up and the campfire smoke starts to just go. And that's what's happening with this chaff. It's moving away. So all that's left is their produce. All that's left is the profit at hand. And so they're saying, here's what happens now. When he's going to be winnowing barley at the threshing floor, it means he's not going home at night. He's staying there to protect his crop. He's staying there to protect his food and his profit. So usually what would happen then is he's going to lay down with his head near the pile of food. Because 1, it's going to deter animals, and 2, it's going to deter thieves. And so Naomi suggests, why don't you go down there at night? This is going to be an opportunity where you're actually going to be alone with him. You can show your intentions that you would like to marry him. So you go and uncover his feet, because in the cool breeze as the night goes on, that'll wake him up. And then you take the position where you lay crosswise at his feet. He's going to be laying this way. You lay crosswise at his feet because that's a position of submission and a servant. That this would be a customary thing. And so she says, I think you should go and propose to Boaz. I think this is in your best interest. She's checked her heart on this, and she says, I'm all about you. I think this is where you should go. I think this is what's best for you. And oftentimes we just have to ask ourselves, do I stand to benefit from this? Or is my heart for the other person? A buddy of mine was just telling me, he recently moved into a new area. He's starting to get to know his neighbors. And he said this neighbor, he kind of motioned over to where the house is. He's like, this neighbor, man, he loves to fish. He's like, he went out with him once. He's like, it's kind of cool. Like, beautiful boat and all this. And he said, except for when I say he likes to fish, like, no, he likes to fish, like, all the time. And a couple of weeks ago, he was in Alaska for a week long, a little over a week. He said he got home late at night. I see him pull in. At 4:30 the next morning, the boat's hooked up, and he's going back out somewhere locally. He's like, man, I don't know how he pulls that off. He's got a wife and kids at home. He said this week, he said his wife and kids are on vacation at Disney. He stayed home to fish. And he looks at me and goes, I just don't know how he pulls that off. And quite honestly, if I'm just reflecting on what I'd be going through, he said, like, I don't know how long this is going to last. Like, I don't know him that well, but I don't know what to do about that. It just feels odd to me. So I wonder how many neighbors or friends or people we have sitting next to us that may be on a similar path. And then we have to go, well, what's our role in this? If we want to help somebody put Jesus at the center of their family, if that's what we're about, then what do? Do I have a difficult conversation with this person? And do I check my heart and say, my heart is for you and your family? I just got to ask, how's your family doing? How's your marriage doing? How are your kids doing? Because ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to play the what-if game, and we're going to get strangled by this and go, and here I sit. And so do we have those tough conversations? No doubt Naomi must have wrestled with this. I'm just trying to put my mind into what it would be like to be a mom. And could you imagine going up to your kid? I mean, you can pick a daughter, you can pick a son, but could you imagine going, hey, hon, I think you need to go down and get on a knee and propose to this guy. How well is that going to be received? Let's turn that coin over. Could you imagine going up to your daughter and saying, hey, this guy you're dating, he's not for you. At what point do we have that conversation? Well, I think we can have that conversation if we take our first check. We check our hearts. And we say, is it about me? If it's about you and what's best for you, then I think we can proceed with that conversation. So it begs the question, are there any conversations that have been lingering in our minds that we can run through this first grid and say, do I need to have this conversation because it's for their best interest? I believe that I'm going to bring them to the Lord in this way. I think we can have this conversation. Well, that's a first check. We're going to check our hearts. But we're not going to stop there. Because ultimately, if we want to take a step towards what we think God has for us, we also want to check with others. We don't want to live this life in isolation. We don't want to live this life alone, because oftentimes I've found that when I do things my way, it doesn't work out. I want to do things His way, and when we do things His way and we have other people to support that, we'll be in the right track. So let's turn back into verse 5 and find out, how does Ruth respond to this ask? How does Ruth respond to Naomi when she says, I think you should go propose? She said to her, all that you say I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went and lay down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. It happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward. And behold, a woman was lying at his feet. He said, who are you? She answered, I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative. First, when I'm seeing this winnowing barley at the threshing floor and not getting a picture in it, spread your wing over me, or spread your covering over me, that sounds awkward, doesn't it? But it would have been clear to the people in the Hebrew language, with the original language, that meant she's asking him to marry him. She wants to come into this marriage. She wants to lean into him, and she wants to be covered in marriage by him. And ultimately, we look at this and we're like, well, that sounds crazy. Why didn't he say something like, will you marry me? Okay, this is 3,000 years ago. Let's say they read our language right now. Hey, what do you think about tying the knot? What? And we would all understand that. Or the other one is like, I'm like, what would you say if you read something, or 3,000 years later ago, they read something that says, hey, would you like to be the old ball and chain? I'd be reading this like, what are they talking about here? This makes absolutely no sense. But fortunately, Beyonce cleared this all up for us and said, if you like her, then you should have put a ring on her. So maybe they read that, and they're like, and so they're all troubled with our text too, no doubt. People will become, and we are with this. But it helps to understand their original language, to understand that what Ruth is doing is coming and saying, Boaz, will you marry me? And so Ruth has her mother-in-law say, here's the plan. Here's what I think you should do. And instantly she said, I'll do everything you say. And she fulfills that plan to a T. Why would she do everything that Naomi says? She's listening to others, but there's some qualities about Naomi that I think we need to have in our lives. If we're going to listen to people, I think there's 3 checks that we want to have that Naomi had. And the first one is she's following God. She loved the Lord and wanted to do everything in His path. Secondly, she loved Ruth. She was after her. She wanted her best interest in mind. She wasn't out for her own self. She was out for trying to look after her. And the third one, I think Naomi knew Ruth as good as anybody in that day and age right there. He was the person that knew her the best. So when you have a combination of somebody who loves God and is chasing Him, loves you and wants your best, and knows you better than anybody else, it's time to listen to them. And so Ruth said, before I take a step in this direction, before I take it past googly-eyeing Boaz in the field, I'm going to check with Naomi first. She seems to approve of this. She seems to be recommending this. And because she crosses all those T's in there, she's a godly woman. She loves me, and I can trust her. Now I'm going to follow this path for her. We all need people like Naomi in our lives, especially when it comes to this marriage idea. Now, oftentimes, when my wife and I work with couples, or even at our marriage conferences that we'll do, one of the things we talk about is having a champion for your marriage. Say, who's your champion for your marriage? Because we know, there's ups and downs in life with relationships, and marriage is no different. If you've been married any length of time, beyond a minute or two, you probably understand that there can be some complications with things. So who do we go to when we're going to be struggling in some of those downs? Because there's two types of people that we will often go to. We tend to automatically lean towards talking to the group of people who will tell us what we want to hear. Because then we can feel justified in whatever decisions we want to make and how we want to treat people. We can get a session going where we can just lay it all out and people will understand and sympathize with us. And we'll get the people we can talk to who they'll tell us what we want to hear. And then there are the champions in our marriages and in our lives who will tell us what we need to hear. And those two people are different. Because oftentimes we don't need to hear what we want to hear. We need to hear what we need to hear. And we need to hear or have a Naomi in our lives that are willing to say the hard thing. So that way we can be on God's path for our lives and not our own paths. Because that's ultimately how it goes. But the truth is, this stuff isn't easy. The truth is, even if we know God's path for us, even if we understand this is the step we're supposed to take, doesn't mean it comes without fear. Verse 10, Boaz says, "May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than your first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence." You know, when anybody in this world has ever looked at me and said, "Don't be afraid" or "do not fear," there's a reason for that. It's because I'm afraid and I'm fearful at that time. Anytime the Bible says, "do not fear," there's a reason for that. So Boaz is looking at Ruth, who's still trembling in this conversation, trying to get up all the strength she can and the courage that she can and fight through this fear to say, "Will you marry me?" And so he looks at her and says, "Do not fear." The interesting thing is, in her analysis, when she was working through all the what-if scenarios, and say she fought through all of those. What if he rejects me? What if he doesn't like me? What if he sends me out from his field from now on and we no longer have a source of food? What if he tells everybody and the township turns against me and now I'm isolated and I have nothing of what I currently have? What if I fail? What if he says no and I have to go back to my mother-in-law and tell her this didn't work? I must have done something wrong. I'm a failure. So all these what ifs can go through our heads and then they paralyze us because we have those same thoughts and feelings as well. But yet Ruth took the fear and she worked through it and she continued on the path, even though it was hard. A few years back, my sisters and I were reminiscing on dadisms. You know what those are? Some of you have those things where you're like, you know what Dad used to always say? Those kind of sayings that stand out to us that we remember. And so we're reflecting on some of these. And then my sisters, who are both, two of them older than me, they were talking about how he taught them to drive and how that process went. And they're talking about the similarities, and we're kind of talking through that together. And then they started saying, like, you remember one of the things that he always used to say to us? He said, "When in doubt, go." And they're starting to laugh. They're like, yeah, being at the stop sign, because we'd pull up and, we're scared and we're 10 and 2 locked in, and you'd see these cars coming and you're like, I don't think I have time yet, I'm going to wait. And you'd see another car coming way down and you're like, I don't think I have time yet, I'm going to wait. And they're like, we'd always sit there and Dad would tell us, when in doubt, go. And they're laughing and they look at me and I'm kind of looking at them puzzled. And they're like, what? I'm like, I never heard that. You never told me when in doubt, go. I almost never had any doubts about whether or not I could make it. I might have been the one he was like, actually, you should be, that would have been nice. You're sitting there and you need to be more in your head and worry about what if. But they're like, when in doubt, go. I wonder in our lives if we need to hear, when in doubt, go. Because it's the fears and the doubts that we know don't come from the Lord, because he gives us a spirit of courage and love and kindness. He doesn't give us a spirit of fear. And when we're wondering, are we supposed to take a step? But we've got somebody with us in the passenger seat who loves us, who's chasing God, and who knows us well. And you're saying, hey, I know you've got fear. I know you've got doubts. I'm seeing everything you are, and I got this. You can go. You can push through this. You can push through your doubts. You can push through your fears. And you can continue to walk in the path that God has for you. Because right now you're sidelined and you're getting honked at. And we got to get out of the way and take a step towards what God has for us and not be crippled by fear. So for some of us, we may be waiting on the Lord. We may be sitting here going, all right, God, I don't know. Do you have this for me? Do you not have this for me? And we're in this limbo field where we're playing the what-if game and we've been paralyzed. And what we need to do is say, who's the Naomi in my life? And some of us today may want to leave and text a friend and say, hey, can we do coffee? Can we meet? I need to run some stuff by you. I think God's got something for me here, but I need to check in with you and see, does this seem to align with what you would see him in my life? Does this seem to connect with where you would be thinking God would do in my life? And so that way we don't make decisions on our own, but we check with others. And through the doubts and through the fears, we can take a step. So we want to check our hearts. We want to check with others, bringing other people involved in our lives. And thirdly, when we want to take a step, we want to check our character. Verse 10, we're going to read through the rest of the chapter and get Boaz's response. He said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than your first by not going after young men, whether rich or poor. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. Now, it is true, I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good. Let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning and rose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Again he said, give me the cloak that is on you and hold it. So she held it, and he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. When she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did it go, my daughter? And she told her all the man had done for her. She said, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then she said, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today. We can take a step, but not before we check our character. Our character is important when we're walking in step with Jesus. And so both of these guys in this story, we have Ruth and Boaz, and both of them are people of character. I mean, Boaz starts out after receiving this marriage proposal, and the first thing he does is he blesses Ruth. And he blesses her because of her character. And he says to her, he said, you are a woman of excellence. And this phrase, this woman of excellence, is used in Proverbs 31. So some of you may have ever heard the term, a Proverbs 31 woman. This is what he's saying. He's like, you are a Proverbs 31 woman. Oh, what a treasure you are. And he said, I've seen your kindness play out in 2 ways. The first one was impressive, but the second one's even more so. See, the first kindness that he's talking about is that she didn't abandon her family. She didn't abandon Naomi in her greatest time of need. He said, you moved back here to care for your mother-in-law, your widowed mother-in-law. Everybody in the city witnessed that. Everybody knows. The city understands who you are and the character that you represent and how you have taken care of your mother-in-law. He said, but that one, man, that's just your first kindness. This last one, oh, this is a kindness even greater. This is a kindness to me. He said, you know, you are a woman of character. You are beautiful. You could have had any guy you wanted. You could have picked some young rich guy. They would have loved you to be able to propose to them. But you know what you did? You honored your family first. You followed the law that God has put down in Deuteronomy. And you are willing to go on with this kinsman redeemer. It's like, Ruth, you are a woman of absolute character. Like, you are a woman of excellence. And then we see Boaz's response. I mean, he's like, this is the kindness you've given me. I don't deserve a woman like you, but yet you're proposing to me? And I'm thinking most people in this situation would be like, whoo, sign me up. Let's go to the courthouse and get this puppy done now. Like, we need to sign, seal, deliver before you change your mind. Like, I just outkicked my coverage on this one. I need to get this done. Except for he says, however, there's somebody who's in the family who's closer. I got to go and talk to him. Because if he redeems you, that's good. But if the Lord wills it, then I will. Because he understands that in Deuteronomy 25, it talks about the redemption of a widow. See, in there it talks about, he said, if a brother marries and he dies, it's the brothers in the family, their responsibility to marry the woman, the brother's woman, and raise up a family in his honor and in his name. And so we understand that from that idea, there's a logical line within the family that there's the redemption aspects of the redeeming the property, redeeming the value, redeeming the family, and raising children under that family name. And so now he's at this point, he says, I'd love to, but here's what God says. So more than that, I got to honor him. And then I've got to honor my relative. Boaz is a man of absolute character. He showed it all throughout Scripture. You know, there's one tricky verse, though. There's one thing that a lot of writers or preachers or speakers will try to get a wedge into this beautiful text. And when Boaz says, but sneak out of here before anybody sees you. And they'll zone in on this and say, man, there's something shady going on tonight. Why else would you want to be sneaking out early and you're coming to him at night? And they've got reason to do that because in this time when they're going to be coming to harvest, prostitution was rampant in this area. And so if somebody sees Boaz being left in the morning, they're going to naturally go to assumptions. But I'll tell you, through studying this whole text, when we start from the chapter level and go out, we see nothing but high character value. And in every instance in this chapter, through doing word studies, whenever we see anything that could be a word that could be used in any way that would be provocative, seductive in any case, those words were never used. Only words that with high character were used. Even to the point of put your good clothes on is a representation of a full gown that is completely covering and also one of those things that is cluing us into this is a marriage that she's proposing. This is a marriage type of a gown that she's wearing. There's no inlet for anything in here that's going to make us question this text because we see their character over and over of Boaz, of Ruth, and Naomi. And character is important. You know, there's a guy that I love to read his books and listen to some of his messages and his podcasts. I'd call him a leader, a pastor, an author by the name of Carey Nieuwhof. And he talks a lot about character. And one of the things he speaks often on is he says, character is far more important than your competency. Your competencies, your skills, your gifts, your abilities, they'll only take you so far, but it's your character that matters way more than those. Because it doesn't matter how high your competency is, if your character is low, that competency is going to fall as well. And so he's got one line here that I'd love to share with you about that. He says, above all, character endures. It's what your family and friends remember about you, for better or worse. And ultimately, it gives you the moral authority to lead. Especially today, character matters most. It's our characters that allow us to continue to walk in step with God and follow his plan and let others join us in this as Naomi and Ruth and Boaz get partnered in this because they're all people of character chasing God. And so we can go, okay, like, what's my character? How do you understand what your character is? Well, we reflect on it. Ask this question: who am I when nobody's watching? What are the conversations I have when I think nobody's listening? What are the things I do when I think nobody's seeing me? And so we can start to understand there's our character. And here's some other examples. If anybody's ever bought a used vehicle from somebody not a dealer, and you understand then you have to take the title over to the DMV, and there's this little spot that says, fill out the sale price. And the taxes are figured out based on that sale price. And oftentimes, nobody's really checking that. So what do we put? Or we go to an annual checkup with our doctor, and they start asking the questions. How often are you exercising? How many fruits and veggies are you eating in a day? How many drinks have you had this last week? How are we accurately representing ourselves when we're faced with some of those questions? What we do in private, is that different than what we do in public? And we can start to understand who we are and what our character is. And here's something that we all just need to come under the idea of. We're all flawed. None of us are perfect. But what we can do is continue to work on our character because it's more important than our competency, and it allows us to walk in step with God. So how do we do that? The first thing I would say Talk to God about it. Spend time talking to him and say, here's my shortcomings, God. Could you do a work in me? Read his word, and we come up to passages like the fruits of the Spirit. I think those are some character judgments that he puts in there. He says, here's the things that the Spirit is trying to do in us. Like, look at you. Are you loving and joyful and peaceful? Do you have patience? Are you kind? Are you gentle? Are you good? Do you have self-control? And we start to read these and we go, I got some things to work on. Caution, speaking from past experience, be careful when you pray for patience. You guys have done that too? Because God has a way of giving us practice. It's like, oh, you want to get better at being patient? All right, here you go. Lob you this one. And we get those over and over and over. But it's those opportunities when we say, God, we're willing to do the hard work on this, that he can refine our character. Because our character matters. And it's what allows us to continue to take steps towards him and be the people that he wants us to be. You know, the cool thing about being in a relationship with Jesus is that we can look back over our lives and go, man, I'm thankful I'm not the person I was. I'm thankful that character has been refined over the years. Jesus, thank you for that. And at the same time, we can go, but I'm not where I need to be. Jesus, I know you've got something more for me, and I know you want to refine me, so help me in this process. Help chisel away the hard parts. Help me come to you. Reveal to me the character flaws that I have, and help me work on those so I can become more like your son. And so we go to him, and we talk to him about it. But let's not stop there, because, again, we don't live in isolation. Let's go to others. Let the Naomis in our lives speak to us. We go up to them and say, hey, here's an area that I think I want to work on. What do you think about that? What have you done in that area? How do you think I could grow in that area? And you put a team together. You could put people together, and they can help us to grow, to be more like Jesus, and help our character go. So we can continue to work on our character as we continue to walk in line with Jesus. There's a story about a guy named Bob. Bob was living in, as I'd like to call it, the bayou. He was living down south. He was in that Gulf region, and often in that region, they would get hit with the seasonal hurricanes. Bob had been living in his home for now over 6 decades, same house. He'd been through a few storms. And there was another one forecast and said, the weatherman about a week out are saying, hey, be careful in this region. It's going to be a rough one. And I've heard that before. And as the days get closer, he continues to hear, hey, in this region, the water levels are going to rise. This is a significant one. And so Bob goes, all right, God, I'm just going to ask for your protection on this. You protected me 60 years. I think you can do it again, so I'm turning this one over to you, God. Well, as the days get closer, the storm intensifies. And the weathercasters are saying it's actually going to be worse than we thought. In this region, they need to evacuate. It's going to be mass flooding. And so Bob hears that, and he's, God, I'm relying on you. I'm watching all his neighbors go, and he's waving them goodbye. It's like, I got faith. I don't know about you guys. Well, the storm's hitting, and the water levels are rising. And the National Guard comes in one of their big trucks, and they're searching the area for any left people. And they see some action going on in Bob's house. They go and knock, anybody here? Anybody here? Bob's like, yeah, I'm here. Like, well, let's go. We got to get you out of here. Bob's like, I'm not leaving. What do you mean you're not leaving? He looks at them and goes, oh, ye of little faith. He goes, God's on my side. He's protected me 60 years. He's going to protect me this time too. And they leave. Another day goes by. Bob's basement is pouring in with water. It's starting to hit the door level. And a boat comes by. National Guard keeps a record of who's still in. So they come and they knock. Bob, we got to get you out of here. We've got to be able to rescue you. It's now or never. Just gave him the same spiel. Because I'm a man of faith. God's going to protect me. Overnight, water level comes in. It's in his first floor, and now he's up on the second floor. And his bottom floor is just deteriorating. He's already watched neighbors' houses crumble. There's a helicopter. You can hear it. It's looking out the window. And there's a ladder that comes down, a big bucket. And they yell out from the megaphone, Bob, get in. We can save you. And he yells back up above the noise, You can't save me. God already has. Shuts the door, shuts the window. Well, the storm didn't stop. Every house in the region was devastated. Bob goes up to heaven and he meets Jesus. I said, Jesus, why didn't you save me? I prayed to you and asked you to save me over and over. And Jesus looked at him and said, I sent you a truck. I sent you a boat. I even sent you a helicopter. What more do you need? I feel like sometimes we are Bob. We're here. We're not taking a step because we think we've got the plan. We're here not taking a step because we're so stuck in here that we're playing out what-if games. And here's God just going, there it is. Get in the truck. I've got the path for you. And so for some of us today, if we've been paralyzed by analysis, the encouragement may be, it's time to take a step towards what God has for you. Because like that ice cream gift card, it is oh so sweet if we take a step forward and come and get it. But we don't do it without a couple checks in place. So let's take a step, but let's check our hearts. Check our motives and make sure they're pure. Let's check with others. We're not meant to do this in isolation, and by ourselves we make some horrible decisions. But with other godly and loving wisdom, we can do the right thing. And then lastly, let's check our character. Let's see that we are people of excellence. People like Ruth and Naomi and Boaz. Let us go out today and take a step towards what God has for us. Father, we ask you for your help. We know this isn't easy, and we know it comes with what-ifs, and it comes with fears, and it comes with doubt, but sometimes we just need to go. And so, Father, I thank you for the examples that you've given us in Ruth and Naomi and Boaz, these people of high character. And Father, I even think of, no doubt there's people in this room that are like, I don't know if I have a Naomi. Would you introduce us to the people that in our lives can start to speak into us so that we don't feel like we're in isolation, but that we are in this world together? May we continue to be able and allow you to work in our hearts and work in our character. And certainly I speak for all of us, I think in this, that we just want to do what you want for us. Would you reveal that to us and help us do that in Jesus' name? Amen.
Amen. Let's stand together and sing our closing song.
Where there was fear, you brought courage. When I was afraid, you were with me. And you lifted me up. You lifted me up. Where there was death, you brought life, Lord. Where there was fear, you brought courage. When I was afraid, you were with me. And you lifted me up. You lifted me up. Where there was death, you brought life, Lord. Where there was fear, you brought courage. When I was afraid, you were with me. And you lifted me up. 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 God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us, nothing can come against, no one can stand between us.
I'm just trying to take a pause and look for any of our single ladies. Because if you go home and propose to somebody today and they say yes, I'd love to hear about that. And maybe I'll be part of your wedding on this day. But hey, head out today. Why don't you introduce yourself to somebody you don't know? Help them to feel welcome here. God bless.